Hi, I'm Dr. Charles Cole III. Welcome to Color Commentary, a podcast where the stories shaping our world are told in black and white first, and then we dig into their deeper meaning in full color. Here's a little more context. Each week, I'll be bringing you the news like this. First, we'll start with what I call the black and white section. It's a clear, straightforward, straight-shooting rundown of the facts. In a tradition of people like Ed Bradley, my granny's favorite, Walter Cronkite, and the other classic, voices of journalism. Then we'll shift into a bit of color commentary. This is where I add my own personal opinions and insights. Sometimes it'll just be me. Sometimes there'll be guests. But let's figure it out together exactly what this show can be. So any feedback along this journey is welcome. Let's get into it. For our very first story ever. What happens when a brand that's built its name on reclaiming Black history suddenly finds its own story being rewritten in court? And what does it mean for a community when one of its greatest success stories is threatened by the very financial system it had to fight in order to get there in the first place? That's the crossroad where Uncle Nearest is right now. It's the fastest growing Black-owned whiskey brand in American history, but now it's finding itself being ripped from its founder's arms, and we got a few questions about it. Before we get into my thoughts, let's get into a little bit of the facts. So what's going on with Uncle Nearest? According to SpearsBusinessInKentucky.com, on July 28, 2025, the agricultural lender Farm Credit Mid-America filed a lawsuit in the Eastern District of Tennessee against Uncle Nearest and its co-founders, Fawn and Keith Weaver. The lender alleges the company defaulted on more than $108 million in loans that financed its expansion. Distillery Trail reports that the lender also accused the company of failing to provide required financial reports and warned that more defaults were imminent. Farm Credit argued that without intervention, its collateral could be at risk. On August 14, 2025, Judge Charles Ashley Jr. granted Farm Credit's request for receivership. As reported by Distillery Trail, this means an independent third party will temporarily run Uncle Nearest, managing cash, operations, and assets while the case plays out. The court also barred bulk whiskey barrel sales and issued a limited gag order on public commentary. According to Kentucky.com, the next step is a hearing on August 20th, 2025, where the court will decide who the receiver will be. The Weavers have pushed back hard. The Griot and Afrotech report that CEO Fawn Weaver called the claims salacious and inaccurate. She described the dispute as a technical default caused by misreporting from a former chief financial officer, not a failure to pay, and insists Uncle Nearest has continued to make substantial payments throughout 2024 and 25. And it's important to understand who Fawn Weaver is. In 2017, she founded Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, inspired by the story of Nathan Nearest Green, the formerly enslaved Black man who taught Jack Daniels how to distill. Under her leadership, Uncle Nearest became the fastest growing independent whiskey brand in U.S. history, with more than 600 industry awards to his name. Weaver herself is a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. She is recognized as the first African-American woman to lead a major spirits brand, and her work has positioned her as both a business leader and a steward of Black history. That's why her voice in this dispute carries so much weight for the industry, for the community, and for the story Uncle Nearest represents. As the Griot notes, Weaver also urged supporters to clear the shelves of Uncle Nearest products, declaring that her team remains unshaken. As the Griot notes, Weaver also urged supporters to clear the shelves of Uncle Nearest products, declaring that her team remains unshaken. And according to Vineyard Gazette, the Weavers' ownership of a home in Martha's Vineyard has become part of the public narrative, showing how personal assets are now being pulled into the story. And those are the facts as we see them today. Now, those were the facts in black and white. Nothing added to it. Let's get into a little bit of commentary. All right, let's start here first. This is a topic that I've seen invade Black spaces in ways that have been a little bit surprising. Like, you don't really see a lot of talk about whiskeys or spirits kind of infiltrate these spaces. But because of the history of who Uncle Nearest is and who this Black woman is and the way that all this is happening, there's a question that's come up. Is this racially motivated? Is this stuff above board? Now, here's my thoughts. It's a little bit of everything. And what I mean by that is, listen, let's just have a real conversation. And this is not fair in the least bit, but I know this. I've been taught this since I was a child. I've been taught that you got to be double as good to get half as much. I've been taught that you got to have your shirts buttoned all the way to the top, meaning that your I's have to be dotted and your T's have to be crossed. Now, we're in a place where whiskey has billions and billions of dollars in market cap on just in the country. It's a very, very lucrative business. And Uncle Nearest is starting to encroach on other legacy whiskey brands, and I don't think people like that. Now, even if this person wasn't Black, I think when you're an up-and-coming business and you are starting to rise and you're starting to see other people's market share drop a little bit, like Jack Daniels start to drop, and at the same time, you're seeing small startups like this grow out of being small startups and start to knock on the door, I think that you start to see corporate games happening. People want to take you out. People want to take what you have. Now, are Black business owners in this space targeted? Listen, man, I know we're in a time, I don't want to be ringing alarms and I don't want everything to be racialized. I think a lot of things are. But we have examples of this. We have the example of Jay-Z going through what he did with his first liquor company before leaving and starting a new one, similar to 50 Cent. Both of these things have happened. And I've heard both of these men talk about being in that space and the unfair treatment. I've heard them talk about that they were targeted in different kinds of ways, and they try to get the best people around them. Here's the thing. When you're Black and you run one of these companies and you happen to be a woman and you happen to be representing a historic brand that kind of gives somewhat of a Black eye to Jack Daniels on some level, people are going to come for you. And any little mistake, they're going to amplify. So do I think that this brand was targeted because she's a Black woman? Not fully. I think that it's a very valuable asset that's about to rise up through the ranks. But I don't think that it hurts. I think that there's enough history in the industry to know that certain people get listened to differently than others. I'm smart enough to know that even in all this crazy Diddy mess and all that, y'all have heard what some of those rumors are. Some of the rumors were he wanted to break away from the liquor distributor that he was in business with. He wanted to buy himself out. And it just so happened that as soon as he started to publicly discuss that, his house got raided. Now, is Diddy into some freaky shit? Sounds like he is. I have no thoughts on the subject, right? But I don't know if all of that stuff is coincidence. I think it's a mix of it. I think that in business and big businesses swallow up smaller ones. I think that it also doesn't hurt if it's from a group that people rarely listen to or take serious in this field. If we were talking about hip hop or R&B or something like that, I think people would be listening differently, which has its own issues of who really runs that and who really owns it. But I also think that this woman and her partner are smart enough to know that any little small bit of impropriety or what looks to be such, they're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And as of now, as of today, her company's in receivership. It has been taken from her. And another thing that I thought was quite interesting is these people aren't dumb that's trying to take it. They know that there's a story that goes along with this brand of whiskey. It's not just that the whiskey tastes great. Listen, unless you're a whiskey connoisseur, I don't think most people are just buying whiskey because it's a refreshing drink. I like whiskey. I'm a whiskey drinker. I know what I look for in it. And I do think Uncle Nearest is an incredible, incredible product. But there's a story that goes with Uncle Nearest. When you meet Black people that got a little bit of change, they love to show you that they have a bottle of Uncle Nearest in their home. When you are working with a group and, some Black folks show up and it's a non-Black group, they love to show those Black people that they understand who Uncle Nearest is and that they got his product. These people are smart enough to know that they can't fully remove this woman who was tied to this story of this man, Nearest, who was taken by Jack Daniels and didn't get any royalties, his family didn't get any money, and he's the one that showed people how to do it. So they're offering to have somebody else run it, but put her at a lower role. I don't know which one is more offensive. The fact that you're trying to take my company, or the fact that you're trying to take my company and demote me and still have me there because you know that people are not going to buy this shit if I'm not attached, if there's not a Black person attached to it. So what kind of predicament does that put us in? Where are we at in a 2025 United States where all these people for the last 10 years that have been about diversity this, diversity that, moving these things forward, this is how we're going to even things out. And some of those same people are now calling for anti-wokeness and doing whatever they can to distance themselves from all that work that's been happening over the last 10 years. There's a lot of people that's showing their hands. So what do you do? How should we address this as a community? And we can get in the entirety of Black people selling spirits to Black people, or selling alcohol, or syntax goods amongst our community. That's a whole other different conversation, right? Maybe I'll touch on that if we get a chance to. But right now, in this case, how do we support this person, and what do we know, right? Now, if you look at these books and you look at what's going on, I did some research. They filed for bankruptcy about, I think, a year or so ago. That doesn't bode well, even though it's a standard business practice. You can just listen to our own president, who openly discusses how he strategically has filed for bankruptcy before. And to be fair, I have business advisors, and they also speak very openly about how to use bankruptcy to your advantage, right? So I don't know if bankruptcy always means that you made a mistake or you don't know what you're doing. Sometimes it's a tactic. I remember 50 Cent famously filed for bankruptcy after he lost a lawsuit that he did not want to pay, and he claimed for bankruptcy protection. And last I checked, 50 Cent is still very, very, very rich. So that alone, her filing for bankruptcy, does not prove that she didn't know what she was doing. And as of more recently, the sales of Uncle Nearest have still been, those things are still flying off the shelf. I even went to go look at all the specialty Uncle Nearest, and a few places that I looked, it was completely sold out. So there's so much value that's nested in this company. Then I had to go look, well, where else is this happening? Is this happening to somebody other than her? Is this happening to somebody outside of this group, or whatever the case is? What I'm seeing is a hostile takeover. I'm seeing big bank take little bank. And as somebody who studies things, I study Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black people finally got a bit of their own, where Black people try to, build something kind of away from other folks and not bother people and build these thriving businesses. And I also know about the massacre. I went to Tulsa, and this is one of the rants that you'll get in the color commentary part, but that's the point of this, right? I went to Tulsa a few months ago, and I went to museums and that talked about the Tulsa massacre, and I got to read the original publications, like the newspaper the day after and a few days after for a few weeks. You get to read it. And quite frankly, it is eerily similar to a lot of what I'm reading about this Uncle Nearest story. See, in those stories about Tulsa, there was a story saying that there was a rape of a Black man to a white woman, that people didn't feel safe. And then that prompted these people from outside of that area to come in to try to find the assailants, which led to this entire city being destroyed, burnt up to a crisp. Those people never got reparations for it. They just had to rebuild. They had to start over. And in that, there was only blame for what these people did. And because nobody could fact check, and because of racism, because of all those things, nobody asked or got the real story until much, much later. Oh, and by the way, they're trying to ban being able to explain what the Tulsa massacre was in schools today. Why am I bringing all that stuff up? Listen, it is entirely possible that this woman has failed as a leader, failed at running her company, run at a deficit, filed for bankruptcy, maybe hired a bad money management guy. All that is very, very possible. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not trying to deny the facts. I've also seen when somebody wants something and they're powerful, I've seen them have power over the media. I've seen reports that are not true come out. I've seen people just take those things and run with them. And I'm also smart enough to know that they often bank on you not knowing history so they can run the same play over and over and over and over again. I'm a fan of Uncle Nearest. If this woman is taken off of the CEO role, I don't love whiskey that much. I just won't buy the brand anymore. I've talked about this on a few other shows. And you know what? It's all the comments. It's a bunch of black people saying, if they take this woman's company, they not buying that damn liquor no more. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think that they're going to still try to do this hostile takeover, because when you're really rich like that and you have the power of a market and you got that market cornered, you get cocky. I think they're going to offer her a lot of money to step aside and give them her company. I think that they're going to try to keep her on in some kind of way or fashion so that her main constituency will continue to buy it, and they'll continue to grow this burgeoning whiskey corporation into a monster built off the backs of black people. And then at the end of the day, you'll look up and ask who the ownership is, and none of it will look like us. Shout out BET. How y'all doing? That's what I think. What's the lesson in it, though? What lesson do I take as an entrepreneur, as a young black entrepreneur? A young black entrepreneur that, if you do get to see a clip of this, has on a beanie, little bit of some little nappy waves going, diamond chain on. I look like a stereotype. You probably wouldn't assume that I have multiple degrees or a doctorate or whatever the case is. In fact, when I just walked through life, I was on a train not that long ago in my hometown of Oakland. I got on the BART, and like sometimes people do, I sat by an elderly lady who immediately grabbed her purse and held it tight and put it on the other side of her body. Had that happen many a time. Ma'am, I promise you I don't want your purse. I promise you I don't. So as somebody that's like that, that's reading and watching this story play out, I've been talking to this story with my friends. I'm an entrepreneur. I work in the nonprofit space and I work in a for-profit space. I run two different companies. And this feels very similar to a lot of situations that I've been in, whether I'm asking in the nonprofit sector for funders and for money, or I have to bring somebody along that doesn't look like me, is a different race than me, but also has significantly less education than I do, yet and still, that's the person that gets looked at as the brains behind the operation. I'm kind of torn in how we talk about this, right? Because I understand right and wrong. I don't want to just have a conversation of right and wrong. You can script that out by yourself. You don't need me to have a conversation about right and wrong. We can have a conversation about real survival, about real thriving. We can have a conversation about what it looks like and what I know I need to do when I go in certain rooms and make sure people know that I am somewhat safe to them. We can have those conversations. So my question to you listening is, what are the lessons that you're taking from this? How are you learning how to navigate this better? I mean, this is not the first company that has lost money in the beginning. I think Google just started technically making money. They pride themselves in being a loss leader. That's what it's called. Well, here's what I think. I think we got to get back to having real conversations about how to survive and thrive in these spaces. Because what I didn't see was when they were talking about these money issues, when they're trying to jam her up, I did not see a black billionaire come and say, you know what, off the strength, I got that. I'm going to take care of that, and we're going to work this out so you can retain your company. See, it's hard, not hard. It is damn near impossible to be successful at that rate here by yourself. When you can kill the head of the snake, you just chop his head off. That's what you do. That's what you do. This woman is clearly the head of this organization, even though she has a partner, even though that there's a lot of black people that love having her stuff and love showing that they got her stuff, and it makes them feel proud and they like to show it off. She has to stand by herself in this moment right now. I don't give a damn how well she's doing. She don't have the power of attorneys that they got. The strategy might be just to wrap this up in court so long that it bleeds her dry to where she has to take some kind of deal. So to my other fellow black entrepreneurs out there, whether your stuff is big or small or burgeoning, how are you insulating yourself? How are you protecting yourself? Or as in one of my favorite movies, Harlem Nights. How do you know when it's time to pack up and move to Chicago? For the people that's not of this culture or whatnot, or maybe doesn't know the greatness that is Eddie Murphy or that of Harlem Nights, let me just tell you really quickly what this story is. What happens is there's a nightclub where they got gambling and a bunch of stuff, and there is Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy, and guess what? The mafia wants their business, and they fight. They fight the good fight, but at some point they know that as Black people doing this work at that time, they can't fight them, but they get their get back. And then they pack up, and at the end of the movie, they move to Chicago to go and start over again. Or you can look about the movie Sinners that we just saw and look at the business aspect of it. Smoke and Stack are down south in the deep south and go up to Chicago and to get some of that good city money. They cannot get a footing up in Chicago. Both of these brothers work in different warring mafias, different warring gangster groups. And what they eventually do, because they can't get ahead, is both of them rob their bosses, pull their resources, and go back and open up a juke joint, and then vampires and shit come. But there's a trend here. So is that what I should do with my companies? Should I have an exit strategy? What is my proverbial pack up and move to Chicago moment? And ironically, I'm doing this from Chicago. Maybe it's happened already, Tommy. I don't know. Tommy's my producer. You're going to hear me talk to him a lot when we do these, especially if I don't have a guest. I don't know. What you're getting right now is somebody who wanted to just go through the story. And for this first episode, I wanted to struggle with this topic. I wanted to not have this part pre-thought out. I wanted to share an intimate moment of the type of decisions that I need to make. Because again, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, if you were Black and working on Black issues, it was a little easier to get some funding for your stuff. And since then, the world has moved on, as it does. There are other issues that are happening. The Gaza Strip situation is happening right now. The crisis of conscience that our country is having under Donald Trump is occurring right now. You have other forces and factions that are reasserting themselves right now, and they want to target those previously what would be called minoritized groups. So how you hold strong in it? What do you do? What do you do even when you see an example of somebody that had a breakthrough in whiskey in this late year of 2025, break into the market, and we're not talking about tequila. Tequila's been, or vodka, that's been popular, but whiskey, and break in and have a smash. And they taking it because they want to right in front of us. There ain't a level of perfect that's going to insulate you or protect you. So how do you do that? Well, here's what I think. One, I think you have something to fall back on. See, when I get contracts, I don't just hire my colleagues or my friends. One of the things I try to make sure I do is I try to make sure they all have their own LLC or their own entity. I want to make sure that they have their own ways to make money, receive those things, file for taxes on their own, separate from me, because you need clusters of people. You can't have power, can't be concentrated, because you can easily take out that source of that power, and then now everybody's scrambling. So if I get a good contract, I need to bring in these other people, but they all have their own entity. I think that's one. And two, well, the reason why we do that, sorry, not two yet, this is like sub 1A, is because you might become persona non grata. You might piss off the wrong person at the wrong time. And to be honest with you, if you're doing this right, that time will definitely come. Any of my friends that will come on this show, we're going to have people like the great Chris Stewart, who's also worked with Tommy in the past. He has a story like this. We're going to work with my good friend Kamaro Gwynn, one of the most talented writers that I know, and just an incredible educator that has dedicated his life to educating Black kids. He has a story like this. We might get the great and incomparable Dr. Howard Fuller to bless us one day on this show, who has made strides in education and educational freedoms for Black people throughout this country for more than 40, 50 years at this point. He's got a story like this too. And all of them say, well, there needs to be more of us. And when some of us get in power, we got to be able to block and tackle. I think that's one thing. Two is almost impossible, but it's the lesson I'm taking from it. You got to be on your P's and your Q's. You cannot skip. You cannot get lazy. You cannot take shortcuts. You got to be as mistake-free as you possibly can. Now, that don't mean that you will be mistake-free. We all make mistakes. But what I mean is the major stuff, you got to keep your nose clean because all they need is a little bit, just a little bit. Just a little bit. And just also for the record, this isn't just advice for Black people or whatever, and this isn't attacking like white people. I don't do that. It's not really my thing. I kind of take people as they come. If you love me and you've helped me, I got love for you and I'll help you. I love Black people as a whole. I will always do that. That's just in my blood and in my DNA. But I've had a lot of white people help me throughout my life. And I love those people like family as well. And I've had a lot of Black people do wrong by me before. Now, it all just comes with it. I'm not foolish in that way. But I'm also smart enough to know that there are systems at play here. Larger systems that are larger than me. And what I do know is that when that system sees vulnerability in you, they're going to take it. Black, white, or in between. But if you're not white, they're going to really take it. They're going to take it in grandiose fashion. They're going to take it in a way to remind you, the rest of you watching, understand your place. So don't skimp out on things like a lawyer. Don't skimp out on things like an accountant. I'm going to say this and be so bold to say, if you're making that kind of paper, you might also want to get an accountant to watch the accountant. I'm not here to have a conversation about what's fair. I'm here to have a conversation about freedom. I'm here to have a conversation about what do you need to do in order to maintain and get your stuff. And I don't know. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm just telling you the lessons that I gleaned from this story. And then finally, I like to do these in threes. Research says that people can only hold up to 3 different ideas or thoughts at a time. So let's follow the science and let's stay with that. My third thing is you have to tell your story and own your narrative. What do I mean by that? Have your publicist, have your team, have your comms team, have your podcast. Because what could have also happened is that Miss Dawn could have been going on podcast a year earlier when it started to look shaky, or she could have had her PR team her publicist start to plant stories or get stories out there early once you see these things happening. Because now it just looks like you're being defensive. It looks like you were scrambling and you were scrambling because you didn't know what you were doing and things were failing, and these people not picking on you. Why is it always got to be a black and white issue? Why is it always got to be race? Maybe you just not good. Maybe you just didn't run it well. Those are the stories now. Now that the stories are coming out and they got the first jump and everything is now in response, that's what people are thinking that are not in your group. So maybe the lesson is, as soon as I feel like this is weird, I'm putting the stuff out. I'm saying, hey, this is what I see coming down the pike. Oh, and by the way, here are our financials. Maybe you go public with those things first. Now, here's the sad part. Even if you do everything right, there's still a chance that it could be taken. But when you take things like that, you know what happens? When you do all the stuff right and they still take it, they drop seeds. Seeds get dropped. And they get dropped along this trail as they pick up, Uncle Nearest, and they're dragging it off. It's a bunch of little seeds that's dropping along the way. And people that don't even drink whiskey are starting to watch that story. And what I predict and what I think you're going to see tens and hundreds of new Uncle Nearest stories in the next 5 to 10 years because people are watching this. And it's inspiring them in a weird and awkward way of, I can do that too. And let me learn these lessons to make sure I keep doing it. Now, Uncle Nearest is still in the fight. I'm going to keep supporting this. I'm going to keep following this. And as we do more stories and there are more breakthroughs, then I'll make sure I update people. I really don't know what happened. I truly don't know if this one, just to be very fair, right? Like, again, because I don't want this to be dismissed as some kind of racial thing, but I'm telling you how I'm taking it and what I'm learning so we can learn together. I want to know what you learned. In the comments, reach out or email us. Let me know what you're taking from this story. Let me know the 3 lessons that you might have learned from this. Let's build that up on our own. But what I'm gonna say is I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know if these people were just negligent. But what I think it was somewhere in the middle. I think that mistakes were made. And I think that in a capitalist society, when you have a burgeoning rocket, this company is on a rocket trajectory. And people, and a true capitalist who may not really care about race at all, sees how much money is on the table, and they want that. And corporate business is one of the biggest gangsters of all time. It's a real thing. But if you want to do big things in life, and you want to make these big impacts, and you want to be on the cover of magazines, and you want to be a titan of industry, just know that these are the things that everybody goes through, regardless of race. Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company, had to go out and restart and build everything from the bottom up again and rebuy his own company. Had to be smart and savvy. The man that Steve Jobs found at Pepsi to replace him, that he looked up to, is the person that put the death nail in his coffin the first go round. It's business, and it's a cold game. And business does not care about your backstory. It does not care if you were historically mistreated by this company. And when you sign up to make that level of money, you are also agreeing that you understand the arena and the new game that you're playing in. Now, whether you've read the code of conduct or the fine print or whatever, that's irrelevant. You have signed up for this type of scrutiny and this type of life. That's why I'll never run for political office. I value my private life way too much, way too much. And I say this as somebody who worked in the Democratic Party for a long time. And, you know, I know people that are affiliated with both political parties in significant ways. But as you move up, those rules get thinner and thinner, and you start to understand the world that you operating in. You need to know the game that you playing, because ain't nobody gonna cry when they knock you out of it. That's all I'm telling you. Anyway, I'm gonna be covering more stories like this, and in the future, you will see us introduce stories like this and also then bring in commentators or people that I know that are really dope on these subjects, and we'll have a larger conversation. But I do want to hear from you. What are the type of stories you want to hear me cover? What are the type of communities that you want us to build together? I want to do something with you. I really do. And if there's a topic or, you know, and it's something that you want to be a guest on, then shoot me the pitch. Let me know. I want to know. But the way I'm closing this episode out is, I know I can't do this alone. The same way she can't run Uncle Nearest alone and be supporting that up-and-coming brand. I need you. So hopefully I'm the right person to be part of this community. And I pray that, you know, the folks that come and rock with me, I want you to feel heard. I want you to feel like you've helped build this show. And I want this to end up being my happy place where I get to come in and just take off my week, take the work off and all that stuff, and really be vulnerable and thoughtful with you all. I'm not coming or approaching this as somebody that has the answers. I'm approaching this as somebody that needs a space to talk these things out, because that's how I think. And I hope it becomes that space for you as well. I'm Dr. Charles Cole III, and this has been Color Commentary with Dr. Cole. Peace. Thank you for listening to Color Commentary with Dr. Cole. We love to hear from you, so drop us an email at colorcommentarypod@gmail.com. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the show, leave us a 5-star rating, share it on social media, and join us every Thursday for more Color Commentary with Dr. Cole.